Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is David Novak. I thought I would talk briefly about this book, Moses, Finley and Politics, which I have finished reading, or actually rereading. I read it when it first came out with little penetration. I think having just recently read Solzhenitsyn, The Gulag Archipelago, and then having read a novel by Victor Serge, I have a little bit more understanding of Russia and Stalinism. And all of a sudden, what I'm reading is making more connections with me. So when I first read this, I had none of that history. And I would like to just talk a little bit about what I've found in this book. If you want to buy a new copy of it now, you're going to have to pay about $120. That's par for the course for academic books, which to my mind is unconscionable, but I don't know what can be done about that. This book is only 140 pages, and so it's quite a hefty investment. Now, you should definitely get this book if you want to learn about M.I. Finley, though I would say that it's more important for any person to learn M.I. Finley's ideas and read the actual writings of Finley before trying to glean biographical information. I don't believe a biography has been written as yet. The first essay in here is by Daniel P. Tompkins, who recently died. And all of the subsequent speakers make reference to him. One has the sense that he was a devoted Finley scholar and amassed a wealth of knowledge about his subject, and one wonders if he did not compile some sort of a biography of Finley. I have not seen anywhere that any such work exists. What I think I'll do is just go through the essays one by one and just tell you a little briefly what they are about. Let's see if I can show you the contents here. I think. So we have Moses Finkelstein and the American Scene, the political formation of Moses Finley, a good biographical introduction. Then Finkelstein, the Orientalist by Seth R. Schwartz, talking about Finley's essential disavowal of his Jewish heritage, the fact that he never disavowed it, at least that's my understanding, but in terms of his writings, it was shuffled off the page, as opposed to becoming a subject in the fore as it did with Momigliano or his friend Vidal Naquet. I think that's how you say his name. Let's see, then there's The Young Moses Finley and the Discipline of Economics by Richard P. Saller, Moses Finley and the Academic Red Scare, Ellen Schrecker, Dilemmas of Resistance by Alice Kessler Harris, Finley's Democracy, Democracy's Finley by Paul Cartledge, Politics in the Ancient World, and Politics by W.V. Harris, who edited the volume, and Un-Athenian Affairs, I.F. Stone, M.I. Finley, and The Trial of Socrates by Thye Jones. And I've talked a little bit about the Tompkins essay in a previous video. Well, I was discussing a different essay by him. This book is apparently, and now I understand, in conjunction with this book. And that pie chart is really a weird thing. It's showing you the numbers of citations to different works by M.I. Finley. I had never really looked at it closely. This book is called Finley, an Ancient Historian and His Impact. So this volume came out of the symposium and was discussing his legacy, whereas this focuses more on the man himself. I read these both when they came out, this after a bit of a hiatus, and it never really gelled in my mind that they were sort of in tandem. I have not reread this book as yet. Now that I have done this one, I probably will make that a project, not for the immediate future. Right now I'm operating within a window of 2 months when I want to dedicate myself exclusively to reading fiction. I have already just broken the rule. So Moses Finkelstein and the American Scene. Tompkins has essays in the other book. I think a number of the presenters did. Let me see. Finkelstein, the Orientalist by Seth R. Schwartz. Of course, when Finley changed his name and moved to England, he tended not to refer to his past. He did not talk about it. The removal from Rutgers was a kind of traumatic experience. So the next essay after that, I believe. Oh no, Richard Soller is next. Now, Richard Soller edited a collection of essays by Finley while Finley was still alive. And Soller talks about Finley's writing on the ancient economy. This is possibly one of the most well-known of Finley's books. In the time since, some of his key concepts, I believe, have been undone. I'm not an economist, so I can't speak for that, but it is definitely a good work for getting your grounding in the ancient economy. So he talks about, now that I'm going back over having read everything, I realize that the different scholars focus on different areas of focus of Finley himself, although none focuses on slavery. Okay, the next one is Moses Finley and the Academic Red Scare by Ellen Schrecker. And she previously wrote a book, No Ivory Tower, which covers the McCarthyite persecution of academics in great detail. Back in the day, as I have said, you could not really get good information, and I wanted to find out what happened to Finley, having heard that something had happened. And Noam Chomsky was scheduled to come to town. He didn't make it. His wife was sick, but instead, I think Tariq Ali and Norman Finkelstein came. And Norman Finkelstein, I hope I'm saying that right, both with him and with Moses. I don't know if it's Finkelstein or Finkelstein. he was um, an electric presenter, and afterwards I sent him an email, which he very graciously replied to, asking him if he knew any information about Finley. Finley's born name having been Finkelstein. I'm not sure if spelled exactly the same or not. I actually asked him if he was related in any way. He said no. But then he pointed me to this book, which I was able to find. And this whole collection of essays gives you a lot more detailed information about Finley himself. This is a history of that period. My understanding is that it sort of came on the heels of the situation of guys like John Service, the old China Hands. There is a book by that title, The China Hands, discussing the stories of these men working in the embassies, I guess you would say, in China, the Foreign Service, who predicted the fall of China to the communists, and for that were all reviled as communist sympathizers. I have not read Lost Chance in China, but I just happen to have it handy. The China Hands I have read, but I do want to reread. I have it somewhere. I read it very young when I had just been back from Taiwan myself and did not really understand a lot of the politics. I think now, having just read or acquainted myself somewhat with Stalinism and the Soviet situation, it might actually be a very good time for me to pull out the China Hands and reread it, or even try to read this book. So she discusses the fate of professors hounded by the un-Americans, I guess you would say, or the Un-American Committee, if that's what it was. Now, Finley's questioning came a little bit before that. He was before the McCarran Committee, though I believe that he was an adjunct to McCarthy or something. And she goes, if you want to understand legally how Finley ended up being persecuted, she explains it pretty well. In a way, it sounds kind of like the story of Socrates. It happened by some chance and has become a historical moment that we can all look back to. Now, I want to just read, without giving you any real context to it, just a paragraph so you can get a sense of her writing. He and another professor, before they were removed from Rutgers, were investigated by a committee. While endorsing the school's stated policy that a member of the Communist Party should not be permitted to teach at Rutgers University, the committee's December 3rd report noted that its members had originally felt that there was something wrong with taking the fifth, but came to realize that Finley and Heimlich had good reasons for relying on their privilege against self-incrimination. It would protect them from having to give information that might become a link in the chain of evidence against them. Finley, after all, had been named by 3 people, and he feared that anything he said to rebut their testimony would become the basis for a perjury indictment, while Heimlich claimed that the Senate subcommittee's questions not only set him up for an indictment, but also violated his right to privacy. The committee recognized that faculty members did have a special obligation to their school, but it believed that such an obligation should not require them to waive their constitutional rights. Accordingly, the committee unanimously recommended that the university take no further action in the matter. The trustees disagreed. So, by all standing evidence that we have, Finley denied having ever been a member of the Communist Party. He may have discussed the communist ideals, and he may have lied. We don't know. I tend to give him the benefit of the doubt, but given the times, I would understand persons lying about their path, their not well-documented path in that manner. Of course, today, anything that you did would probably exist online. So she takes the case, and you do get the sense, even though he was let go from Rutgers, you get the sense that much in the case of Socrates, that nobody really wanted the situation to culminate in the way it did, and even after he was let go, they tried to help him find another teaching position somewhere. Of course, it was impossible for him to teach in America, and he ended up going to England. The next essay, Dilemmas of Resistance, it's the least strong of the essays in this book. In fact, I wouldn't call it very strong at all, though it might be of use to somebody who's younger, who has never heard of any of this stuff, to give them an overview of the whole witch hunt against these academics and other people, and the efforts to resist. She brings up the playwright Lillian Hellman, and I think winds up talking a little bit more about Lillian Hellman than Finley, which was okay for me because I had forgotten about that, and I never really knew who Lillian Hellman was when I was growing up. She was a figure of some notoriety, and so now I think I have a little bit of a better handle on that. The next one follows Finley's it's Finley's Democracy and Democracy's Finley, and it follows pretty much this book, Democracy, Ancient and Modern. It's a series of lectures. It's a very brief book, and Finley's main thesis in this is that, contrary to some of our modern day Republicans, actually all Republicans in my lifetime, democracy functions best with an engaged, informed populace, that it is not in the service of democracy to have a dumbing down of the citizenry and to have people being stupid and ignorant. Politicians tend to like that kind of a population in a democracy because it is easier perhaps to sway their votes. So that was Finley's main concern in this, and Paul Cartledge discusses that. Now, he is an author himself of some note. I think I may have read one of his books one time, but his writing is very good, and now that I've read this, I might consider dipping into more of his books, although he is an ancient Greek historian, and it's not an area that I'm so interested in delving into at this time. But I would like to read a paragraph from him just to give you a sense of how delightful it is. It is this checkered history that accounts in part for the background of Democracy, Ancient and Modern, and for its dedication, both as originally stated in 1973 and as repeated for the enhanced second edition of 1985, to My Friends and Students at Rutgers University, 1948 to 1952. Only in part, for here the word friends must be allowed to carry an unusually powerful freight, or rather charge, of associative meaning. For in 1952, or near the height of the anti-communist witch hunt, chiefly and indelibly connected with the name of Senator Joe McCarthy, Finley, having been informed against by an erstwhile comrade and colleague, Carl Wittfogel, was summoned before the Senate Subcommittee on Internal Security, chaired by Pat McCarran, Democrat, Nevada, and accused both of being currently associated with the left-oriented Institute of Pacific Relations, founded 1925, and of having run a pre-war communist study group in his house. To give a flavor of those appalling times, it might suffice to mention that in 1953, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were executed as communists convicted on a charge of conspiracy to commit espionage. So Cartledge's essay is pretty insightful. The next essay by W.V. Harris, Politics in the Ancient World and Politics, talks about this book, which I believe is Finley's penultimate book. I'm just learning this now. I've read Finley for years, not understanding any of how any of his stuff relates to each other. Now, I've read this one a couple of times, and it's always been an unsatisfactory book. I don't exactly know why. Not one of my favorites. I think because of how he just lumps ancient Greece and ancient Rome together and generalizes when both places were distinct. Its main focus, I think, is trying to talk about how the book has not aged so well. And then after that, W. Harris. Sorry, I should have had everything tabbed or something, but I just don't have any tabs around here. And the last one is one by Ty Jones, Un-Athenian Affairs, I.F. Stone, M.I. Finley, and the Trial of Socrates. And this essay is more about I.F. Stone, who wrote a book about the trial of Socrates, published after Finley's death. Though he consulted with Finley a little bit, he tries to make the case that the two men led lives in parallel and that they were kind of like each other. I don't think the case is made convincingly. Obviously, there was an affinity there, but let's see. I had something marked out. Oh, here it is. Jones ends up making assertions that are not only untenable, I mean, they can't be proven, but they don't even seem realistic to the Finley that I feel I know from having read his works, which is that Finley never went back to visit the Soviet Union because he did not want his cherished illusions about how wonderful it was there to crumble. I don't see that there is any evidence that Finley had any such illusions like that. So it's not a totally satisfying essay, but nevertheless, there are some points, and I would like to read a couple of paragraphs from that. Still in the realm of ideas, though closer to practical affairs, Stone ... proceeded to analyze the political science delineated by Plato in the Republic and the Laws. These works, organized around fictional Socratic dialogues, revealed the blueprint for an ideal state. But these imagined utopias were characterized by censorship, eugenics, restrictions on travel, the execution of dissidents, and the use of cultural indoctrination to ensure the obedience of the poor. These Platonic innovations in thought control, Stone noted, went beyond any kingship the Greeks ever had known or had ever known. They were, in fact, the first sketches of what we now call totalitarian societies. It was fortunate for Socrates, he continued, that at the time of his trial, the Republic had not yet been written and would not be read to the judges. If this was indeed Socratic teaching, it would have been even harder to convince the court that Socrates had not turned some of its most gifted youth into dangerous revolutionaries. Many of Socrates' students had overthrown the government. So, all in all, a very good book for learning about Moses Finley. I still have my fingers crossed that a biography will come out. I agree with Oscar Wilde that it is more important to know what a person thought than to know what they did. So I don't place much store by biography. And if I go to my grave without having read a biography of Finley, it will not be a great loss. However, if one does come out and I am able to read it, you bet I will rush to purchase it, even at the cost of $120 if I happen to have that in my possession. So something is going on here, so I'll just hold out and see if this leads to anything. I will leave it at that. Thank you for stopping by my channel.